Welcome to the Published Author Podcast, where we help entrepreneurs learn how to write a book and leverage it to grow their business and make an impact. I'm your host, Josh Steimle. Today, our guests are Bonnie Harvey and Michael Houlihan, co-authors of the New York Times best-selling business book, The Barefoot Spirit: How Hardship, Hustle, and Heart Built America's #1 Wine Brand, which chronicles their humble beginnings in a laundry room in 1986 to their creation of an international best-selling wine brand. And their latest book, The Entrepreneurial Culture: 23 Ways to Engage and Empower Your People, tells entrepreneurs how to better lead their teams. Bonnie and Michael, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Josh. We're happy to be here.
Yeah, Josh, great to be here.
I'm excited to have you on today because you're a perfect example of the type of people who are listening to this show, entrepreneurs who want to write a book that they can leverage to help them grow your business. Before we dive into your book too much, give us a little bit of background. What's your story? How did you guys come together and decide to create a wine company of all things? And then take us up to the point where you decided we're going to write this book as well.
Well, that's a period of time of about 25 years or more, but we'll try to keep it short.
We've got time. Go for it.
Michael and I both met here in Sonoma County in the wine country. We were both business consultants. And though neither of us were really wine drinkers, our clients were in the industry. They were the grape growers or wineries that we were consulting with. I had a client who was a grape grower. He hadn't been paid for his grapes for 3 years when I started working for him. And I asked for the contract, and he didn't have a written contract. He had a handshake, which is just fine, but it wasn't producing any income here. So I said, well, let's see if we can't collect those funds. It was $300,000. So I sent my new boyfriend here out to collect the funds.
He was the enforcer.
Yeah.
So I went out to this winery, and the day I got there, they had just declared bankruptcy.
Oh.
So it didn't look good for the home team. But I went through with the meeting anyway, and I was able to secure a trade, goods and services instead of money for the debt. So what we got out of the deal was $300,000 worth of wine in bulk and bottling services to put that bulk wine in bottles. No labels, no corks, no foils. We had to get all that. We had to get the glass. We had to get the marketing program. We had to understand the distribution system. We had to do all that. But, ignorance is bliss. And so we said, hey, it's better than a stick in the eye. How hard could it be, right?
How long could it take?
Right.
We figured maybe 3, 4, 5 years at the most.
So you literally fell into the wine business by accident.
Yeah.
Yes, we did. We took advantage of an opportunity that we really couldn't let go. The grower who was owed the funds, he had a full-time job, winemaking, and he also had the vineyard he was managing. He said, I can't take over a new business. So we said, well, I guess we can. We can't let that money just go away. So that is how we got started in the wine industry. We started with no knowledge of the industry, and we started with no money. And we started out of our laundry room. That was the only place where we had some extra room because we couldn't afford to rent an office. And we had this extra space where the washer and dryer is supposed to be because we couldn't afford a washer and dryer. So we went out to the old barn out back and found a door and washed it off, put it on 2 sawhorses and put it in that space where the washer and dryer was set up to be. And that was the first office of Barefoot Wines, which is now the #1 wine in the world.
I love it. So you couldn't afford a washer and a dryer, but somehow you owned a wine company.
Yeah.
Well, it was debt. Yeah. Somehow we did. That's right. Then the other thing, too, as Bonnie said, we had no knowledge of the industry. We were business consultants, but so what? The industry is very particularistic. I mean, every state has its own laws. Every supermarket has its own procedures. Every distributor has certain policies and whatnot. And so we had to learn all that, and we had no idea how much we had to learn. But because we didn't know any better, we proceeded in the direction of success. We asked people questions. We like to say we made friends with people in low places. And these are the people that do the actual work. See, because we didn't know enough about the wine industry to ask the white collar people what to do. So we asked the blue collar people, and they were the ones who would really spill. And they told us, they said, brands that look like this, they don't sell. Packages that look like this, they get lost in the warehouse. Don't do this because this will happen. Don't do that. That'll happen. So
that's fascinating. What would have happened if you had listened to the white collar people?
If we'd gone in thinking that we came from a family that had been in the wine industry and we knew all about it, well, we wouldn't have asked any questions, and Barefoot wouldn't be in your fridge today.
It would have just been another also ran that, hit the market for a few years and then disappeared.
So now you end up with this wine business and you're getting good advice from the people who really know what they're talking about, but still to go from that to becoming the #1 wine brand, like walk us through a little bit of how that happened.
It was like, as we say in the book, getting your brick for the day, right? Like every day a brick falls out of the sky and hits you in the head, right? And this goes on for like 5 years of just getting wake-up calls and insights. And because we're outsiders, we come up with solutions that the industry's never thought of. And some of these solutions really bolt us up in the marketplace quickly. And our whole approach was, fun, easygoing,
Right.
Consistent flavor. That was just the opposite of the wine business at the time. They were uptight, they were very standoffish, very kind of prudish, and, they worshiped the French.
There was no French on our label.
Yeah.
You could pronounce every word. I was intimidated by wines because I don't speak French. I couldn't pronounce the names of the varietals and sometimes not even the winery. So I thought, well, if we're going to be in this industry, I'd better be able to pronounce every word on the label. Well, come to find out, there were other people out there that were intimidated by wine. And Barefoot was really an entry for them into the wine consumption because it was non-intimidating.
Mm-hmm.
It had a cute foot on it. It was big. You could remember it. The name was the same as the logo. It was easy to see out on the shelf. The price was right. It was low price. It had gold medals. We started putting gold medal stickers right on the bottle. And we cared so much about what we were doing. We felt that everyone who touched our product was our customer. And the way to get our product on the shelf and keep it there so the consumer could find it was really to give each person who touched our product, each company, the distributor, the retailer, all the distributors, sales staff, and our own staff, treat them like they were all customers and give them what they wanted, find out what they wanted and give it to them. Now, the wine was really designed for the female shopper because that's who was buying the most wine in California. And we started with the chain stores. So when she's going out and shopping, for her groceries on a weekly basis, she wants to grab a bottle of wine. Well, we wanted that wine to be our product. So we made it easy for her to find it. And the taste was not only delicious, but easy on the palate, shall we say.
This is interesting. There was a professor at the Harvard Business School, Clayton Christensen, and he wrote a book called The Innovator's Dilemma. And he talked about how if you want to disrupt a market, you go from underneath. You start at the bottom and you target non-consumption with a product that's good enough for the people who don't have anything. And that sounds like exactly what you did. You targeted people who were intimidated by the wine that was out there, and you gave them something that was good and good enough for them and made them feel comfortable. And then you worked your way up, right?
Right. You have to remember that when we started Barefoot, it was like 8-1 beer over wine in the United States. Wine was not popular in 1986. And what we did is we popularized wine. You know, we made it easy to drink. We made it non-vintage. We made it $5.99, you see, as opposed to $25.99. So, I mean, nobody's going to try something new for $25.99. See? So for us, it was more about expanding the wine aficionado envelope than it was competing for the people who are already inside of it. In fact, we didn't compete with them at all.
Is that how your competitors saw it? Did they see you as a threat, or did they say, we don't want those customers anyway? At
first, they said, you're cheapening wine. You're making a joke out of it. But then they said, thank you for sending all those people into our tasting room who used to drink beer and martinis.
Right, because you created a lot more wine drinkers that then wanted to move up and try the more expensive stuff, right?
Exactly.
Right. So yeah, it's quite a story, but it's a story of, you know, education, and it's kind of an outsider's inside view of the wine industry. And, you know, the wine industry has very little to do with wine. It has to do with distribution and distribution management, because wine is heavy. You know, you're not going to buy a $5 bottle of wine on the internet because it's going to cost you $5 to deliver it. But you might buy a $90 bottle of wine because it only costs $5 to deliver it. So the point is that with a product like wine, which is you know, weight intensive, it goes better in a store, even though it is sold direct to consumer at the higher price points. But the lower price points is going to be in the stores because it's easier for the customer. It's a better price.
Gotcha. Now, eventually you sold the business. Is that right?
Absolutely,
yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So how did that come about? And was that I assume that was a good deal for you?
Well, both parties were happy. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And it didn't take the 3 to 5 years that we thought it would. It took 19 years. So it was a get-rich-slow scheme.
Right. What was interesting is our acquirer hired us as brand consultants to, as they say, keep the Barefoot Spirit alive. And we like that term, the Barefoot Spirit, so much that we entitled our book, The Barefoot Spirit. It's kind of like it's the entrepreneurial spirit behind the Barefoot brand, because we weren't wine people, but we were entrepreneurs. And so we practiced entrepreneurship, and that includes things like being resourceful. It includes things like finding strategic allies. It includes things like not taking no for an answer. It includes things like making a mistake, but writing it down so you don't make it again, and figuring out what you have to do to prevent that in the future, and a myriad of other principles that are woven into the book. We also, as we spoke before the show, didn't want the book to be a litany of do's and don'ts. You know, our first, you know, why did we write this book in the first place, Bonnie?
Yeah, that's my next question, is back up a little bit. What was the inspiration for the book? What was the day that you said, you know, we need to write a book? How did that come about?
Well, Michael and I have always loved writing in the first place. But once we sold our company, our staff came around that we were still in touch with and said, you know, working for you was the most unique, wonderful experience we've ever had. And you have to write a book to talk about the company culture that you had, which is why we all stayed with you and no one quit in the last 5 years. Some had been with us for nearly 20 years, as long as we'd been in business. And because our approach was so unique, we wanted to share it with other people. And we thought, well, the only way to do that is in a book. So we wrote a book. And it was all in story form. We knew that we had to use humor or people weren't going to read it. We don't like anything unless we're entertained by it personally. So if you're going to put a foot on your label, you'd better be entertaining.
Yeah, and like she said, we wrote it in story form. And the reason we did was because we looked at most of the business books, and they are written kind of in a patronizing way. And in the last 25 years, business books have become more and more of an outline. They even, have the little keywords out in the margin now, and you can say, oh, here's the 3 things you got to do. Here's the 5 things to never do. Here's the 20 things your customer wants from you.
And it's all good advice.
It is, if you can stay awake for it, right?
Exactly.
So the problem is when you're it's a top-down approach. It's like, I'm telling you this is what to do, right? And, so it turns a lot of people off. So we thought, well, why don't we just get away from that and just give them a story and let them draw their own conclusions,
right?
Because they'll see the action and the outcomes. They'll see the characters. They'll know what motivates the characters. And as a result of the outcomes, they will learn the lessons. And hopefully even better than they would in a prescriptive text, because now they can say, I want to be like John, in that scene where he goes into the buyer and the buyer says, get out of my office. I never want to see you again. But then winds up going out of the office with the 2 truckload order. So I remember how that transformation took place. See, I'm going to apply that in my business.
You see, it's the story that they remember. We could write out all the principles that we used that made us successful, but that's not as easy to remember. The story you remember, and then the principle naturally follows through. So that's how we felt we could get the most information, the lessons that we'd learned, to others so they can succeed faster.
Well, speaking of stories, tell us the story of how you actually wrote the book, because sometimes having a co-author makes it easier. Sometimes it can make it harder. How did you split the work? How did you actually get the words out onto paper?
Aha.
Well, we had a writer. We worked with someone who was helping us get the book together, and she had suggested a writer. And I felt right away this was not a good writer. So she'd actually written the first draft of the book, and we looked it over and it was terrible. We threw it right in the garbage can, 100%. And then we went out to find our own writer, and we found Rick Cushman. He has a great sense of humor. He'd been writing for the Sacramento Bee for their food and wine column for many years. He'd gotten a lot of awards. He'd written a book or 2 himself. And I read one of his books, and just right in the foreword, it cracked me up. I said, this guy's got great humor, and he talks to the average person, which when we were in the wine industry, that was our end user, was the average person. Instead of trying to make wine sound, so much above most of you peons out there that we don't have to, address your needs whatsoever. No, he wrote with humor. He wrote with great style. He loved to tell a story, and we fell in love with him right away. So Rick Cushman is the one we gave our stories to, and he came from Sacramento. It's over an hour from here. What is 2 hours?
Yeah.
And he would come and stay with us for a couple nights, and we'd tell him stories, and he'd take notes, and sometimes he'd record it. And then we'd have a wonderful dinner and have a bottle of wine or 2 and tell him the stories that don't go in the book. So he really got a full feeling of who we were and what we'd gone through, which enabled him to put our personalities in the book as well. And that's how it was written. Yeah.
And he didn't sneak any of those other stories into the book?
No, he didn't.
No, he didn't.
He didn't.
He had to cut a lot of those, a lot of stories out that we wanted in the book. And the way he said it is, it doesn't look like The King. He said, if it doesn't really fit the story and the message you want to tell, it's still a great story, but it doesn't belong in the book.
Yeah, when he wrote the book, it was about 8 inches thick. And I said, how are you going to get that down to a bi-coastal airplane ride, which is about, 5/8 of an inch? And he
that
said,
is really hard to cut, isn't it? Because I'm sure that you had stories where you said, oh, but this story is so good, we've just got to include it. And Rick was probably saying, it's great, but no, it doesn't fit. We've got to cut it out.
So I would recommend to your listeners, if you're going to get a ghostwriter, make sure that they understand the principle that you're trying to get across. What is the basic message here? Is it a message of tenacity? Is it a message of, innovation? Is it a message of humanity? What is the message?
And what is the core message that you are trying to get across in the Barefoot Spirit?
It's a you can do it story. This is doable. It is not what you expect. It's more work than you thought, and it's different work than you thought, but this is doable. And so that's the message. It's an encouraging message to entrepreneurs because they see all these crazy ways that we duct tape stuff together, literally, at times to create solutions, and how we were underfinanced. You hear most entrepreneurs say, well, I failed because I was underfinanced, or my second round of financing didn't go through. They're always blaming it on the money.
Well, they probably went out and rented an office and hired a bunch of people. Didn't take that for us to be successful.
Yeah, it's a message.
It took innovation.
Yeah, and practicality. I think practicality is the key here. You want to be successful, get practical.
Yep. I went out and rented that office and bought all the furniture for my first business, and it didn't work. So I'm a testament to that as well.
Yep, that's not what it takes.
Right. So when you were writing the book, who were you thinking was going to be the audience? I mean, your team had asked you to write it, but who else were you thinking about as you wrote that book and as you put it together? What was kind of the dream reader?
Yeah, when we started off, excuse me, we thought it would be people who enjoyed barefoot wines. And certainly a number of those have read it. But as we got through the book, and about the time it was finished, we said, this is really a story about entrepreneurs and their struggles and their success. And it's a story about how to work with various people, how to support your community, and how your community can support you. And we realized that in order to reach more people with these business lessons that really apply to any business, then Michael and I had to go out and speak at the universities that teach entrepreneurship, which was a big surprise to me. Michael announced to me one day that we were going to become speakers for schools that teach entrepreneurship. And I said, no, we're not. But yes, we were. Now we've spoken at over 60 schools internationally and nationally that teach entrepreneurship, and tens of thousands of students have really benefited by reading the book. They'd all take the book as well, and hearing us speak. They were inspired by the struggles that we had overcome.
So it's not just, I was just going to say, it's not just the people who are thinking about being entrepreneurs. It's the people who are entrepreneurs and they're faced with challenges like, okay, so I got my business started. Okay, so now I built it up and I got a few big customers, but now they're blackmailing me and threatening to discontinue me, and I'm stuck. So I have to expand. Oh, I expanded. Oh, now I can't afford the expansion because I can't cover the cost of expansion. I can't wait 3 years for it to pay off. So those are the kinds of problems that you face in business. So the Barefoot Story is really inception to monetization. It's like, here's the journey. This is our journey. Your journey may be different, but you're certainly going to face the same challenges.
Yes.
Like reinventing yourself, like becoming the owners of a wine company that you weren't expecting, or becoming a speaker when you didn't expect to become a speaker.
Exactly.
Yes, that's right.
Or writers when we didn't expect to be writers.
Oh, but we both enjoyed writing.
Yeah.
But now we write 2 articles every single week on 2 blogs that we have, the barefootspirit.com and
Consumer Brand Builders.
Consumer Brand Builders.
Yeah. So if you have a CPG brand, you want to go to Consumer Brand Builders and you'll get 20 years of experience right there for free.
That's great. And we'll link to both of those in the show notes as well.
Sure.
So tell us about how the book ended up becoming a New York Times best-selling book. For a lot of people, that's kind of the dream of being an author, is seeing their name on that list. How did that happen?
Well, first of all, you have to realize that the New York Times, unless they've changed their policy, doesn't necessarily make self-published people New York Times bestsellers. They want you to go through a official publisher. Okay. Now, the publishers really aren't going to do anything for you. They're not going to sell any books. You're going to sell all the books yourself. And so you wind up going through the paper publisher just so that you'll qualify to be a New York Times bestseller. Okay, so the idea here is you want to have a deal with your paper publisher where you can buy the rights back after you become the New York Times bestseller, because why pay them when they didn't do anything to start with? And then the second thing is, in order to be a New York Times bestseller, you really have to sell a certain number of books in designated retail stores around the country in a certain week, like Sweeps Week on television, right? And it really does have a lot to do, like Sweeps Week on television. It has to do with how many of your UPC codes on your book scanned across the scanner in a cash register in a bookstore. You know, like Lou's Books in Little Rock, Arkansas has to sell 2 of your books. And maybe there's one in Manhattan that has to sell 100. And maybe there's one in San Francisco that has to sell 30. So one of the things that we had going at Barefoot was that we were distributed nationally and internationally. So we were able to go to those distributors and say, listen, you know, this is your opportunity to get the story. Your customers want the story more than the product. You can buy this story from us. It is at this bookstore in your neighborhood. Buy it on these dates, okay? And then you have to be careful that you don't ship it to the store ahead of time.
Yeah, we've got a lot of pre-orders. We really work to get that. Family, friends, distributors, salespeople, everyone that we've ever known. Everyone on our Christmas list.
It's very difficult, Josh. It's very complicated. I don't think if we didn't have the experience in the wine business and understand, you know, the Nielsen ratings and how they are averaged and how they're scanned, we probably would have never been a New York Times bestseller. But we understood it, you know, because it's what was beaten into our head for almost 20 years.
Well, that's very interesting how you were able to use your distribution network for your business to actually get the book on the New York Times best-selling list. And that's unusual. I don't know many people who have done that, if anybody else has done that, but there might be somebody listening to this out there who says, hey, I've got a consumer brand, I've got distribution, maybe I can at least use that to give my marketing for my book a bump. So
yeah, but the thing is, it doesn't give your book a bump. You know, you can have New York Times bestseller, you can have Amazon bestseller, you can have all those badges. And yes, you should have those badges, because some people won't buy them if it doesn't have a badge. But it's not going to do anything for you. I mean, what's going to happen?
Put a lot of money in your pocket.
What's going to happen is you're going to write the book. You're going to sell almost every copy yourself.
Yeah.
You see, and then you might be able to go on speaking tours and incorporate book sales in your fees. That's one way to do it. Another way is to go to schools and get professors to buy them for their classes. That's another way to do it. But it's a tough business, let me tell you. Wine selling is easier.
So if you want to make money, start a wine company. If you want to make an impact, be an author.
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
So tell us about the second book then. Where did the idea for that come from?
The Entrepreneurial Culture, 23 Ways to Engage and Empower Your People, is basically the what to do book that came from the Barefoot Spirit. So it's a smaller book. It really just tells you in different areas exactly what we did and how to do it. 23 ways to engage and empower your people. And that is to give them the entrepreneurial spirit themselves, So they're encouraged to excel in their own way to improve the company. And that is a very good book as well. They're really companions, The Barefoot Spirit and The Entrepreneurial Culture. But then we did something else. We took the Barefoot Spirit book and we turned it into an audio book. We found that our audience in conventions as well as the university were coming in wearing headphones. And we asked them what they were listening to. They were listening to self-improvement tapes.
And podcasts.
And podcasts,
like
yes.
yours.
And we said, in order to reach more people, which really has been our goals, to share our experiences, because we've been through the landmines, so you don't have to get blown up like we were. If you want to be an entrepreneur and start a business, you can learn a lot of lessons that we learned the hard way. And in order to get to more people, we said we have to put it in an audiobook.
But we didn't want to put it in any audiobook. We went out and we bought the top 10 audiobooks that were for sale on Audible. And they seemed to have the monopoly on audiobooks. And so we listened to them and they were great. Every one of them was fantastic. But they were all read to you. They were all, narrated. So one day we were driving across the Nevada desert and here comes Prairie Home Companion on PBS. And it's Guy Noir, Private Eye, a 1945 style radio theater,
yes.
With actors and actresses and sound effects and music. And we thought, this is a fantastic way to communicate through audio, which is an audio play, like we had in the 1940s before television, right? And so, and especially considering the fact that it's entirely mobile, you're not, tethered to a screen. You're not tethered to a page. You are jogging, you're driving, you're cooking pasta, you're vacuuming your floor, and you're listening to a story that is taking you on an adventure and you're learning from it. And you can put it down anytime you want. You can pick it up anytime you want. So we thought, let's do it this way. So we started asking around and we got hooked up with some friends in Hollywood who are actually produce movies. And they have actors and actresses, like Ed Asner plays the part of this snarky supermarket buyer that throws Barefoot out because he
that's
doesn't
great.
think he's out. But you see, that is a fun approach to a business book. That's a new and fun approach. And for people that are like 24 to say 44, they really appreciate audiobooks. It's like one of the fastest growing mediums out there. So we were very fortunate to win the top 5 business audiobook of the year from the Audiobook Producers Association, Publishers Association for 2020.
Well, that's great. I mean, probably because it was so unique.
That's what they said. They said they never heard nonfiction like this.
And it was self-published. And this award ceremony is put on by all the audiobook publishers. And,
who are the big boys? I
had talked to one of the judges, and she said she was flabbergasted that a self-published audiobook had actually made it to the finals.
Well, yeah.
So
it sounds like you put the work into it and you were creative and unconventional. I'm loving this because you're giving a lot of unconventional tips here to our listeners and hopefully helping them think of things they've never thought of doing before.
Well, I told you we were outsiders. So, I mean, we never written a book before. We've never done an audio book before. We never did a wine business before. So
far, so good.
Yes.
Seems to be working out well for you.
We approach it differently.
So what's your real motivation behind all this? Because you sold the #1 wine company. You don't need the money. You don't need the exposure. And yet you're writing all these articles. You're publishing these books. You're going to all this work to get this word out there. Why are you doing all this?
Well, we like to help others.
Yeah, we do. And we want to keep this working,
Yeah. And it's really interesting for us to meet people who are who have great stories and to hear their story, because we already know what our story is. We've told it a million times. but we're interested in their story because we learn so much, and we have so much in common with them. And we can say, yes, I know exactly how you felt at that juncture. I know about this challenge that you had. How did you solve it? And they solved it in a different way than we did, and we learned from it. So yes, we're motivated by, helping others and educating ourselves, and, staying on top of the entrepreneurial education industry.
Yes, and that's why we're now offering business audio theater to other founders so they can preserve their legacy, so they can put down in an audio form the principles that they use that created the success that they're having.
That's part of the same motivation I feel is there are so many experienced entrepreneurs out there, and they have this amazing career, and then they retire, and then they die, and all that knowledge is lost unless they record it somewhere.
That's right.
That's right.
That's right. And we don't want that lost. It's hard-earned lessons, and we wanted to preserve ours, which we did, and now we want to preserve yours.
Yeah. But basically, this COVID business has really taught us all a lesson. We sent everybody home and we said, okay, here you go. You're going into the 21st century, like it or not. You're going to be on a screen now. You're not going to drive to work. You'll be working on a keyboard. Now, we want you to stay loyal to the company, and we want you to be excited about the company, and we want you to practice our company culture. Very tough order. It's a very tough order, with the baby screaming over here, the dog is barking over there, the mailman is at the door, and she's trying to conduct her work. The kids are trying to learn offline in the bedroom. What's to stop her when the COVID is over from saying, you know what, I really got to stay home. I've had a taste of it, and there's freedom, and I got to have it. I got to work from home. So what am I bid? Who's going to hire me to work for home for you? And so now you're going to start losing employees just because you want to bring them back to the office after COVID's gone. So how do you engage employees and make them loyal? We think it's by telling them your story. We think that they can identify with you and pull for you and say, wow, I sure hope Josh makes it through this next hurdle, right? And that's what we got to do is create engagement and loyalty in an off-premise workforce. It's a tall order.
I love it. So do you have any more books planned for the future?
Well,
we're talking to several clients that are interested in business audio theater. And that will be what we're doing in the future, is we'll be telling someone else's story and relaying their principles in story form, in audio.
That's great. But for yourself, do you think you'll write any more yourself? Any other books?
Well,
we write articles every week, and also in the business journals. They pick it up. For 3-4 years now, every month they print one of our articles. Yeah. And other magazines as well. So yes, we continue to write, but those are articles, not books.
Yeah.
I suppose, we've written thousands of articles, and we can, curate them in a number of different fashions to create new books on demand. So the beauty of it is you get to be, as experienced as we are, which is really writing every week, 600 words twice. That's 1,200 words a week for 10 years. That's a lot of weeks and a lot of articles. and it's so much fun for us to analyze current events in terms of classic principles, so that people can start to see some continuity in life instead of just, chaos. So
not a fad, but a classic.
Yeah.
Classic way of doing business.
It's not retro. It's like the Roman Empire is not retro. It's classic.
Right. Well, what I would love to read from the two of you is if you ever write a book for this audience that you're talking about with the legacy, and you write a book for them, explaining to them why they need to record all their lessons and how to do it. If you ever write that book, I would love to read that, and I'd love to spread that around. there are a lot of
It's
people
there.
who need that message.
It's there.
We did it.
Oh, you did it. Where's that?
Yeah, it's 21st century book form. It's a website with articles and endorsements and interviews
podcasts.
and it's Business Audio Theater. I got barefoot on the brain. BusinessAudioTheater.com. And if your listeners go there, they will see, the thinking behind Business Audio Theater and why it is, we think, the next big thing.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
And you don't need a book already written to create an audio book.
Mm-hmm.
We have our author, Rick Cushman, and others that can listen to your stories and create a story in the form of an audiobook, dialogue. And then we can use our actors in Hollywood and give you a fabulous production.
Awesome. Well, I hope we can send some people your way with this podcast.
That'd be lovely.
Bonnie and Michael, thank you so much for being with us here today. Where's the best place for people to find you? Is it the Business Audio Theater, or is there another website that would be better for people to go to first?
Well, they can go to thebarefootspirit.com, which is the name of the book, The Barefoot Spirit. And once they're there, they'll find links that will take them to all of our other sites. So it's a real library. When they go there, they'll be entering a library. It's the kind of place that, if you're serious, you could spend a month there.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Bonnie. Thank you so much, Michael, for sharing your story and telling us about your journey to becoming authors. This has really been fascinating. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you. It's been fun.
You.
See you, Josh.
If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to spread the word, please give us a 5-star rating review and tell your friends to subscribe too. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere else you listen to podcasts. And if you're an entrepreneur interested in writing and publishing a nonfiction book to grow your business and make an impact, visit publishedauthor.com for show notes for this podcast and other free resources.